Nova Guest List Podcast
with Kieran McGuinness.
The very best in indie, alternative and homegrown music from the seriously addictive Radio Nova.
So that's the brilliant Soda Blonde on Radio Nova from the album Small Talk from a couple of years ago. And we'll get to that in a minute while we're playing that, because we're very, very lucky to be chatting to someone on the digital frontier. Joe Donnolly is an online music presenter. He does a lot of Instagram and TikTok, and he's part of this new kind of breed of, I guess, like music influencers who are using their feeds to talk about, new music and nostalgia and reissues. And with Joe, he talks a lot about his top 5 albums or his top 10 albums of the 80s or whatever. And it's always really entertaining, interesting. I often, see his stuff come up, and I obviously want to disagree with him massively. And that's part of the fun of it. So we're very, very lucky to have Joe Donnolly on the line. How's it going, Joe?
Not too bad, Kieran. How are you?
Very, very good. It is wonderful to hear your wonderful voice on the radio. You, of course, came through the ranks at TXFM and Phantom FM back in the time. Loads of radio. We would have interviewed my band a lot when we were starting out and stuff like that. And now you've moved into this kind of digital, your own kind of feed. And I think it's very exciting. How are you enjoying it?
Oh, I'm enjoying this hugely, I have to say. I really, really am. It started as a hobby, and I really am quite astonished at how, people have reacted to it. And yeah, it's just an absolute pleasure. It really is.
Yeah, it's great. I love all this kind of stuff, and I wish that what I saw on my feed was more kind of niche and interesting, and experts talking about stuff that they love. And something like this, I think, is really important for Irish music, for music discussion, but also for Irish music, because there's people like yourself talking about, brilliant bands from Galway that I haven't heard before, or, an amazing kind of album that I haven't kind of heard of that I need to hear about. How did you kind of end up doing this?
Well, I wanted, so it was around this time last year. It was the summer of last year. And I suppose, to be quite honest, I really wanted a hobby, and I wanted something that would reconnect me with music, and maybe something that could be as close to being back doing alternative radio as possible. And I was looking at a lot of videos on Instagram Reels and on TikTok, and there was a lot of people talking about music, hobbyists, collectors, enthusiasts. And there was a huge amount, and there still is a huge amount, of vinyl love. So there was a massive amount of videos and channels appreciating vinyl, very well produced content, really nice stuff. And that's great, And I thought, well, I have a little office here at home, and I've stacks of CDs that for some reason I've kept over the years when I worked in radio. And I thought, well, actually, not many people are doing CDs. And I realised that around 2008 up to about 2015, the record companies, they reissued a ton of stuff. They reissued because it was the death, it was the end, it was the final days of physical media for music. And they realized we need to make some money fast. And they realized that older consumers, people who grew up listening to music in the 70s and 80s and maybe the early 90s, would buy reissues because they'd want that bonus disc of remastered stuff, or they want the demo versions and so on, or the little poster and all that kind of thing. So I had a load of that stuff. And I realised, well, look, a lot of people are doing vinyl appreciation, and they're doing vinyl channels. Why don't I do a CD one? And I'll start off. So I'll start off with CDs, and I've a huge amount of those reissues. Everything from the Teardrop Explodes to Jimi Hendrix to Black Sabbath to Blur, whatever, you name it. I'll go through them, and I'll video me opening up the disc and talking about it and so on, because there's stuff there that people, I thought, well, maybe someone will find it interesting. I don't know. But I enjoyed doing it anyway. And in the back of my mind, I thought, well, if you're going to do a content channel, there's two things. It needs to be consistent, and you need to have almost an endless amount of ideas, because, you need to do it all the time. So I thought, well, I'll start off with CDs, but I could do new music now and again. I could do the odd vinyl record. I could do new Irish music. And then, oh, wait a minute, I could do some lists, top 10 albums from the 70s, top 10 dance music albums, anything, you name it, lists. And and I kind of went, actually, this is a really interesting way of building it and having things to talk about. So I guess that's kind of where it came about. And I started literally on the 1st of October last year.
Oh, okay. So you're coming up to your anniversary. Well, I pretty quickly saw that this was coming up, and it just tickled something exactly that I'm into. It felt a little bit like something I would want to chat about in the pub with someone. Here's my top 10 Radiohead albums. Here's my top 10 Led Zeppelin songs. Here's my top 10 whatever. I don't know. It's just fun, debatey, kind of entertaining. And then you mix through it new music picks. You mix through it like classic, maybe sort of half forgotten, Irish bands or whatever. And that kind of stuff, I think it's really, I'm just so glad someone is doing it because I find it very entertaining, but I love to see it as well. Is there a sort of a philosophy behind what you do? Or as you say, it's, I'll grab the closest CD and I can do something on this? Or is there more planning maybe into like directions you take?
Yeah, there is planning and strategy. There is, because I've learned that over the years. So, for example, after a while of stumbling around going what works, what doesn't work, there's 3 posts a week. Every second week, the Thursday post is a top 10. Every alternate week, the Tuesday post is a new music picks. And, whatever, I have an interesting one coming up soon from a Welsh electronic music label that raises money for cancer charity in the UK, and it was set up to do that. It's absolutely amazing story. I'd never heard of them before. It's just remarkable. So that's the kind of planning and the strategy. And then the philosophy is I really just want to enjoy it. And I want people to kind of, as you've described there, that they might find out something that they didn't know about before, or music discovery. And, there's 2 elements to that. One is that I get a lot from it too, because people will always comment and go, "Oh, have you listened to that? Or have you seen that documentary about that band?" And I'm going, "This is great." In fact, I've bought physical copies, like CDs, from commenters who recommend it. And then the other thing was that the philosophy is that it has to be authentic. So I've, anything that I do, I really do believe. It's not rage-based. Very often with the top 10s that you mentioned, people will react quite viscerally and they'll say, "This is rage-based. Why did you put that album at number 1?" And, I learned that your authentic self is the one that will succeed. If you are not authentic, people see through that. And, sometimes it takes me a long time to come up with a top 10 list, but, that's what I believe. Yes, I stand over it. If you don't agree with it, no worries. But, it's not rage-based. It really isn't. It's funny that people get very animated.
Well, I mean, obviously you can't believe anyone who produces content on the internet isn't aware of potential reactions. But we'll move on. We'll assume everything is truthful. So we're talking to Joe Donnelly, who has carved out an amazing niche online on TikTok. He's KildareJoe, and you can find him as Joe Donnelly on Instagram as well. I really, really, really like the kind of stuff that you do. Why don't we do a list right now? Why don't we do a list? So we played a little bit of Soda Blonde, and I believe they sit into a list. So what is our top 5 that we're going to look at right now, Joe Donnelly?
So the top 5 that I'm looking at is the top 5 Irish albums of the 2020s so far.
Nice.
So it's now 2025. We're halfway through the year. We're halfway through the decade. So I've kind of picked my 5 favourite albums since the start of the decade.
Okay, well, fantastic. Let's do it. I have opinions on this as well, would you believe? Go for it. So why don't you give us your top 5 there?
Absolutely. So at number 5, it's Soda Blonde with the album Small Talk, released in 2021, which was their debut. They, of course, were Little Green Cars. Then Stevie Appleby left, and this is the band without Stevie, and they found themselves a new identity, so to speak. And it's just a beautiful album. I describe it as a really confident collection of very heartfelt alternative pop songs, you could say, with really great vocal harmonies. At number 4, I'm going for Cormac, an Irish artist that I think is really, I think he's a bit underrated, to be honest, because I think he's brilliant, absolutely brilliant at what he does. His 2022 album, Equivalent Exchange, is my number 4. There's some great collabs on it. You've got the voices of Jafaris, May Kay, Jack O'Rourke and Loa. He reminds me a bit of George Fitzgerald, or even maybe Jamie XX, that album. Melodic house, indie pop, even a bit of kind of hip-hop, a bit of downbeat hip-hop.
Yeah.
At number 3, I'm going to go for New Dad, the band, and Madra. I think they have a new album coming out in September.
They do.
Madra was released, in 2024. Stunning debut, kind of shoegaze, 90s indie rock, all that kind of thing. Julie Dawson is the lead singer. Her vocals are just incredible. She actually released a solo album this year or last year. that's just a fantastic album, one of the best albums.
Well, why don't we have a little listen right there from the album Madra? This is New Dad and Nightmares, and we'll come back and chat to Joe Donnelly after this on Nova. Okay, so that was New Dad, chosen by Joe Donnelly as one of his best albums of the 2020s so far, one of the best Irish albums. Okay, Joe, we're up to number 2. This is very exciting.
I'm going to go for Super Extra Bonus Party. They released an album in 2023 called Late Night 99. And some people might remember that name because they were the Kildare band that shocked everyone by winning the Choice Music Prize in 2009. And I think that they've always had a kind of an outsider status. This is their third album. But they followed up their debut, the self-titled debut, which won the Choice Music Prize. They followed that up with an album called Night Horses, which was just as good. And then there was just a big long break. So I was delighted to hear them come back with Late Night 99. It was long overdue. There's some really nice collabs on it with Nina Hines. They've collaborated with her before. And it's just a lovely blend. Like, you couldn't pin them down to a genre, Super Extra Bonus Party. They do everything, really. They're like, this album sounds like it was produced by Danger Mouse. And that's high praise, and I really mean that, because when you listen to it, you're brought into the world of the album, so to speak, and there's lots of little sonic avenues. You know, everything is in it.
Super Extra Bonus Party, brilliant. So, number 1, let's chat about our number 1 Irish album of the 2000s so far. Very exciting.
Well, look, I don't know if this might surprise some people, but I'm going for the band Just Mustard, and it's their album Heart Under, released in 2022. No such thing as a difficult second album for Just Mustard, because this was great. It's a blend of like industrial sounding gothic vibes with kind of shoegaze and noise rock. I would describe it as a very immersive album, but it has a heart of darkness, and that's meant in a very positive way, because again, the world of that album, it's quite cinematic. And I just like it. Yeah, it really does it for me. And I think they've made a sound that sounds like something from the late 80s maybe, or the 90s, but also sounds completely fresh and original too. Again, I'd say, I think it's Katie Bell is her name, the main female vocalist. Her singing style, it's dreamy, ethereal, slightly sinister even at times, slightly spooky. I just think it's class.
Yeah, well, that is a fantastic list, Joe Donnelly, and that's the kind of stuff you can see on his feeds. Of course, he's on Instagram as Joe Donnelly, and he's on TikTok as KildareJoe. I think I'd have to throw in maybe a Fontaines DC album if I was choosing, a Lankum album, maybe False Lankum. That would be up there for me.
Literally those two bands. After I sent it to you, I went, I bet she's going to say, why didn't you go for Lankum or Fontaines DC? Now, wouldn't take away from it at all, but just maybe not quite top 5 for me. But that's just personal taste.
But that's it. You can like the albums. I really like this. This is a top 5. But I think I'd throw in the Bicep album as well. And I definitely have maybe the Saint Sister Where It Should End album, which is amazing. But look, this is the excitement of debate. There's loads and loads of great stuff we can chat about. Joe Donnelly doing a brilliant job online. Go and check out his feeds. It's just such a fun way of presenting kind of interesting music discussions. And it's a pleasure to talk to you today, Joe.
Kieran, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. You're doing great work, and keep it up. Thanks a million.
No bother. Why don't we play something from that brilliant album Heart Under by Just Mustard. This is I Am You, and this is Radio Nova.
The Nova Guest List Podcast with Kieran McGuinness. The very best in indie, alternative and homegrown music from the seriously addictive Radio Nova.